Opportunity for you today. My name is Brandy Paul. I'm the Director of Communications and Engagement for the district. So all the newsletters we send out, anytime there's a snow day, yes, from Dr. McCann, I get to send you all the text messages and emails. I've also had the extreme privilege of getting to know each of these individuals a little bit better just over email, because tonight they will be inducted into the Westside Alumni Hall of Fame, and you're going to find out why when they introduce themselves. I think one of the things we try and tell you when you're here at Westside is we know you guys can accomplish absolutely anything that you want to do. Whether you want to be a movie star, whether you want to play professional football, whether you want to cure cancer or be the best teacher Nebraska has ever seen, anything you want to do, we want to give you the tools to help you get there. And by bringing in these incredible individuals today who are at the exact same school that you're at right now, we're hoping to show you that you can do anything you want to do. We are giving you the tools of success and achievement that you just need to grasp and run with to make those things happen. So with that, I'm going to have our wonderful individuals go right down the line, tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll start with some questions.
Well, first thing I can tell you is I was not going to become a professional football player after playing for the Warriors. I have a unique career, and I feel like the career was one of being having doors open for me by various people, and then being dragged through those doors. And it was, in a word, I owe a lot to the master that came to the double E class in UNL. And he said, I know all of you are thinking about aerospace. That was a hot deal back in my day. He said, somebody ought to look at computers. And so I did. I wanted to be wherever the action was, and that started me off on a career that was just outstanding as far as I'm concerned.
And this is Mr. Brian Halla, for those who we're going to introduce him one by one. Can all of you hear okay? We'll get a microphone. No? Okay. We'll get some microphones and start passing those to him. And I have to embarrass him a little bit because I think it'll blow away everyone in this room. Mr. Halla was one of the key participants who created the PlayStation. Got to unveil it in New York City, yes? How many, have you guys ever played PlayStation before? Yeah? I thought so. I thought maybe. All right. We'll go next to Colonel Michelle Olson.
All right. I will try to use my booming military voice without the microphone. I had an incredible opportunity to start my career as a dance major, proving that what you think you want to be when you grow up and what you end up being don't necessarily always have to be related. But it gave me the opportunity to really figure out what I wanted to do, and that was to lead people. And by joining the military, I've had the opportunity to travel all over the world. I've moved 10 different times. I've worked in a couple of different fields in the military. My core specialty is in the field of intelligence and analysis. I've also had the opportunity to work in the cyberspace industry, doing both offensive and defensive cyberspace operations. And I've had the opportunity to fly. I've flown combat missions over both Iraq and Afghanistan in the 21 years that I have been in the military. And I definitely wish in many cases that I could tell my 18-year-old self what I know now, but the reality is the message that I hope you take away is you can be absolutely anything you want to be. It just takes a little bit of hard work.
Thank you. So my name is Jordan Tapro. I graduated in the class of 75. And like Colonel Olson, I was also in uniformed services for 25 and a half years. In fact, I retired 10 months ago. Say a little something about public service. If you want to pursue something in medicine or in science, you can do that through Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, but there are also two others, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration and the U.S. Public Health Service. I was in the Public Health Service and retired Rear Admiral last December 31st. I'm now at the Gates Foundation and working in global health and a career in science that also leads to working to help people that aren't nearly as prosperous or as fortunate as all of us with the great educational opportunities we've had, and the access to food and clean water that we take for granted. I pursue a career with the Gates Foundation now, working on something called the neglected tropical diseases.
I'm not sure this is working.
We're troubleshooting
That's
right
okay,
now.
I can talk.
Can you all hear us now, or?
Yeah.
Better?
So I'm Nancy Keegan, class of 1975, and I want to echo, first of all, what you're hearing from everybody, that you are set up to do whatever you want to do. When I was here, I was a shy kid. I was positive I wanted to be a veterinarian, no doubt about it. So I did not do that, actually. I had a disastrous summer job working for a veterinarian, really realizing I hated it. So that was thankful that I had that job. I was a chemical engineer out of here. I loved science and math, and had a career as a chemical engineer, then went back to school, got some training in finance and business. I took absolutely zero finance and business classes when I was here, had no interest, but I became very interested in that and went on to be an investment banker in corporate finance, helping companies with their financial strategy, mergers and acquisitions, raising financing, structuring their capital, that sort of thing. And I'm retired now and am doing a lot of volunteer work and philanthropy work, helping particularly educational foundations with their investment strategies.
So I'm Pam Smith, and I graduated in the class of 1968, which was the class that was really great, just in case you didn't know. And when I was in high school, I had the opportunity to do some independent study. I had been fortunate in elementary school to take an experimental language program in Latin in 3rd grade, and it just awakened an interest in foreign languages. And so by the time that I got to Westside High School, I kind of had tested out of all the language classes that they could offer. So I had 2 amazing teachers, Fraulein Held and Madame Cooper, who steered me for 3 years in high school to independent study of foreign languages, French and German specifically, and ended up testing out of all language requirements when I went to college, and so I was able to really do my own independent study in college, and so my major was languages. What did I do with those languages? I didn't end up being a teacher or exactly working in languages, but I did end up living abroad for 20 years, and of course I used my languages intensively. My father was very happy about that. But while living abroad, I traveled with my husband, who's here today, who was in an international corporate career, and I was able to really drill down on what I call a 3rd sector career. You've got the business sector and you have the government sector, and those are well represented here at this table. And then you have the 3rd sector, which is community service, nonprofit organizations. In the rest of the world, they're called NGOs, non-governmental organizations. And I was able to really focus on women's empowerment in my life.
Wonderful. Well, here's kind of the structure of what we'll do today. I'll start by asking our panelists a couple of questions, hopefully get your guys' brains going a little bit more, and then we're going to open it up to you. So as we move along, if you think of something that you'd like to ask someone in particular, or that you'd like to ask everyone, just jot it down. We're going to spend about 20 minutes with my questions, and then I'll open it up to you. As we get to the end of the mod, if you have a class in mod 14 you have to get to, that's fine. Please just excuse yourself and head on out. All right, with that, I'd like to start. Nancy brought up a really good point that she had one class in particular that really kind of inspired. She didn't know what exactly she wanted to do, but she knew what she loved. So if we could, I'd like to go down the line, and each of you, if there was a class or an activity that really made a difference in shaping your career and what you became, I'd love for you to share that with our students. Do you want me to start? That'd be great.
Well, I'll just build off of what I said before. I had these 2 amazing teachers, and each year we would sit down at the beginning of the school year and just make a plan about what I wanted to study. They were very supportive, but also very strict and very focused, and they required me to be so as well. So that really taught me not only to look at where I was going and to set some goals, but also to sort of dream about where that could lead me. And so that was a great life experience. I just have to say, and I do plan on telling this story tonight from the podium, but I had these two women who were just sending all kinds of signals to me to say, go, 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 do what you want and do it well. And then there was the infamous Clara Dunn, who was the Dean of Girls. I don't even know if you have a Dean of Girls now at Westside High School, but Clara was this very large, imposing woman, and Clara would roam the halls looking for girls like me, whose skirt might be just a smidge too short. And so Clara, was she here when you were here? No, this was all skirts. So if Clara set her sights on you, she would come and ask you to kneel in the hall on the floor. And if your skirt did not touch the floor, you were sent to the principal's office. Well, a couple of those, and calling my mother and telling her to bring me a skirt that was long enough, sort of taught me that, you know, you can have people in your life who say go, 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 and then you can have people in your life who stop you dead in your tracks. And it really taught me at age 16 which road I wanted to take.
That's impressive. At age 16, I did not know what road I wanted to take, I'll be honest, so I admire that. To get to Brandy's question, I found that I loved my chemistry class. And that was unexpected. I mean, I was good at science and math, and I liked it, but I really was thinking I would do something more in the medical side. But I was a little bit worried about all that school, that many years of school, frankly. And at that time, you took chemistry when you were a senior. I don't know if it's still that way, and I just absolutely loved it. I did extra. I read about chemistry. Our teachers that year were Mr. Bowe and Mr. Biga, and I'll be honest, I had to look that up. I did not remember that, but they actually made the class fun. And looking back at what it said in the yearbook about them, they had not been teaching very long. They made the class a lot of fun, and they instilled in us a lot of confidence in our ability to do well in chemistry. And obviously not everybody in the class came out feeling that way, but man, I got to college and I felt like I could blast through any chemistry question, and it turned out I could. And so that kind of propagated my feeling that I was good in chemistry. And as I said, I went on into chemical engineering, and that class really made all the difference in making that decision.
Certainly brings back a lot of memories to hear that. I was in class of 75, and chemistry was also my senior year. So I was unusual on that through like middle school. I went to Valley View. I didn't really turn on to school in any major way. I didn't know that I had aptitude to really, take myself academically to really great places until just by chance in 9th grade, my last name is Tapro with a letter T, and there was a new kid who also started with the last name of letter T and needed a new friend, and before I knew it, we started hanging out, and he did his homework, and I, through friendships, found that you can find out that, hey, you can almost go anywhere. So I started with that, and then by the time I got to high school here, I really turned on to math, and then I really turned on to the biological sciences. I think in 10th grade I had Harley Hardison. I'm not sure if that name is remembered, and he was just an amazing guy, and you had your own mice, and you had to do experiments with them, and then you also had the didactic work, and we had a pumpkin who was the class, not a pumpkin, a porcupine that was a class pet that would climb the trees while you were taking your exams and not climb your legs. It was just really exciting and really fun environment. And then I had two great physics teachers in my junior year, and then Ron Crampton was my chemistry teacher, who was just an amazing man. And then for math, I had a guy, if you look back in the old yearbooks, his name was Alvin Glore. He was a guy who wore these 1930s and 40s black suits with a skinny little tie and a white shirt. He would pull out his chalk on a string into a circle on the board, and he would teach calculus. And those of us back then, if you wanted to have calculus, you had to come in an hour early at 7 a.m. We used to call it sunrise service. So it was just amazing exposure to amazing teachers, and then through that friend Rex and 2 more friends, and a large number of friends, but really 3 or 4 super close friends that really got into school. We had our behaviors and did some things that all high school students do, but by and large we were really turned on by science in school, and it really changed my life.
So sorry, guys.
Awesome. I share similar stories in the fact that I appreciated all of the opportunities that I had at Westside to dabble in different things. I took what we called zoology. I'm not sure, it sounds the porcupine wandering through. I was in band, I had great opportunities, but really I think the key that set me up for success, the one thing that I truly appreciate Westside that I took away, was the modular scheduling and the responsibility that Westside students get that nowhere else have I seen that responsibility given to folks at such a young age. And though, as I mentioned before, I had this dream of becoming a dancer, once I got to college, I realized that was probably not realistic for myself and my lifestyle. So I switched majors to criminal justice and ultimately ended up joining the military. But what it gave me was a leg up on all of my peers. I knew how to manage my own calendar. I knew what was important, what wasn't. I knew where I could maybe get away with goofing off a little bit, but I knew where I had to toe that line and what was important. And those were the skills, honestly, that I can attribute back to my time here at Westside High School. And it put me ahead of my peers in the military. And I think that that's what allowed me the opportunity to get into some of those leadership positions that really helped me to become who I am today.
So I was speaking to an advanced physics class in Los Gatos, California, a senior in physics, and I held up, this was quite a while ago, I held up my phone and they said, does anybody know how this display changes when you do this? And I looked at the sea of blank faces. The sea of blank faces probably tell me everything about the applications that run on the phone, but I have no idea about how that works. And finally, one kid raised his hand and said, oh, those are analog devices, decelerometers that are done with onboard MEMS technology on the chip. And I said, come see me when you graduate. But I'm going to make an impassioned pitch here for technology, follow technology. It is so exciting now what's happening. I just left the board of Cisco last year, and they were rolling out petabit. And petabit is 1,000 times faster than terabit. And terabit is how you load a movie wirelessly in 13 seconds. So with petabit, you can literally see every keystroke in the world at the time it's being stroked and find out where it goes. And petabit is what's going to enable autonomous drones and eliminate the car industry. That's just one thing. That's about power and speed. The other thing is about the convergence of all the sciences now. And we were doing so many things for medical applications. National Semiconductor was working with Lawrence Livermore Lab, and they had a laser that could generate 1,000 volts times 1,000 watts times 1,000 per second. We were working with it because we did ultrasound. And ultrasound would make a cancer cell vibrate differently than a regular cell. So we'd shoot the ultrasound and they'd point the zapper at that cell and zap it. We're working with Eli Lilly to do an array of temperature sensors that would detect any blockage in the heart externally without having to go through an angiogram through the vein. There's so many things that are going to happen in the future of technology that I would just urge you. The reason I bring that up is of 23 pledge brothers, that all went out for electrical engineering. I was the only one that made it. And I made it not because I was smart, but because Coach Jim Tangdahl, who was the coach of the football team, pulled a bunch of us into a room and said, guys, calculus is going to hit you like a truck. But he said, don't be afraid of it. Think of it as the area under the curve. So between that and Chem 6 at UNL, I managed to get my double E degree. I've had just a tremendously exciting career because of being able to see these developments in technology. So I really urge you to think about that.
Well, amazing advice. And I want to backtrack just a little bit to allow you all to hear a little bit more about our panelists, and kind of a two-part question for you guys to use that into what you would tell these students to keep in mind. I think the one thing that all of our panelists here have in common, they have seen the world. They have traveled the world, whether it's Dr. Taparo fighting Ebola in Africa, or Ms. Smith setting up economic empowerment programs for women in Hong Kong, where they may not have those same opportunities. Vast experience seeing other parts of the world and things maybe we take for granted. So with that, I would love for each of you to share one of your most memorable experiences in your career, and I guess just something you want our students to keep in mind about where they're at, maybe what's going on in the rest of the world, just the big picture, what you want them to keep in mind. Brian?
The most exciting thing in my
Sure, most exciting thing.
The most fun I had, and probably the most exciting, was I'm in a meeting and my events person came in. This is when I was CEO of National Semiconductor. And she said, Brian, I got you a great gig. She said, you're going to be a keynote speaker at Comdex with Bill Gates and Carly Fiorina. And I said, her name was Ernie Wade. And I said, Ernie, cancel it. I'm not going to do that. That's a systems show, Comdex. And Bill Gates and Carly Fiorina, and this marquee is going to look like Tom Cruise, Julia Roberts, and Ziggy Nerlman. And nobody's going to show up. And she said, it's too late. They've already put the brochures up. And so it just so happened the next meeting I had was with my CTO. And we acquired him when we bought his company. When he did his PhD at the University of London, he used chaos theory to decide how smoke comes out of a smokestack. And his thesis was taken by a guy who set up a financial company and could use it to predict what would happen to stocks. Anyway, I went up to the board and I said, okay, if I got to do it, what I'll do is I'll announce the day that the market turns and the GDP and the recession is over. We're in a horrible recession in 2001. And so I said, this semiconductor is kind of a sine wave. It ramps, it gets bigger, and we're in the middle of the bottom of the sine wave. And so we're just going to prove that we know exactly when the market's going to turn by going back in history and plotting all of those. And I said, so let's make it like April 15th, because that's close enough to the speech that everybody will be excited about it. And anyway, my CTO, Ahmad Bahai, took it so seriously that he filled up several whiteboards with chaos theory. And he came to me one night and he said, Brian, it's more like June 30th that it's going to turn. And I said, okay, we'll make it June 21st, because that's my anniversary, and I never remember it. I'll remember. Anyway, so every speech I'd have from that time on until Comdex, I'd say, and we've proven exactly how to predict the upturn. And they'd all say, well, how are you going to do that? And I'd say, I'm going to announce it at my speech at Comdex in 2002. And we packed the room, standing room only. And I had this giant slot machine up on the large screen. And it started spinning, and it said, first it said the 21st, and then it said June, and then on the year, it rocked back and forth until it came to 2002. And the place just went nuts. We had confetti cannons and the lights, and the Rolling Stones thing, the singing started up. And I got a standing ovation as a chip guy in a systems environment. So that was kind of fun. That was exciting. And by the way, that June 30th was the inflection point where the market turned to the greatest GDP increase in 32 years. We missed it by just those 9 days. Gets predicted right on the spot. Sorry.
All right. I have had so many amazing opportunities, but if I had to pick just one, I would say one of the most memorable times was receiving a phone call in, 2007. And it was about 6 o'clock at night, and I was told, pack your bags, you're leaving at 6 o'clock in the morning. And that was the direction that I was given. I wasn't quite sure where I was going. I knew what was going on in the world at the time. But I also knew that my unit had just shipped out to go to from England over to Greece to conduct operations. And so I was a little baffled by the fact that I was not I had not gone forward with them, but I was receiving this phone call. I showed to the airfield at 6 o'clock the following morning, and they put me on a flight and flew us into Turkey. And the President of the United States had made some agreements at the time about a level of support that the United States military was going to provide. And I was named the Director of Operations, and I was told to establish these operations and get them started, and to do it as quickly as possible. So as a major at the time, I was given the authorities necessary to coordinate with the embassy, to coordinate with the Turkish government, to meet one-on-one with their representatives, to establish satellite communication out of an old weapons bunker, to run the concertina wire around it, and basically to enable my small team to get operations up and running in about 72 hours. And we proceeded to conduct those operations from November through January, when they finally got a full-time rotation in place to get it on a normal cycle of support that continues to this day. So that's many opportunities, but that is one that stuck out as incredibly frustrating, but rewarding beyond compare.
I'm just enjoying hearing these stories very much. I hope you all are. Probably the most exciting time in my career as a shoe-leather disease epidemiologist, chasing epidemics. That's kind of what I did at CDC, was global epidemics. And the Ebola virus, the first epidemic of that was in 1976. We're now in the 28th known epidemic. The second to the worst one so far that's happened has been about 500 cases. And that was a decade or more ago in Uganda. And then in 2014 in West Africa, one emerged that ended up becoming the first real regional and potentially global epidemic of Ebola. So with the number two having, less than 500 cases, this one had 28,800 cases with over 11,500 deaths. It was frightening, it was huge, it was massive. And we were getting into the fall season. We had an introduction of people who didn't know they were ill, who got on planes, went to Europe, one came to the United States and Texas, caused a lot of alarm. The public was very frightened. A lot of talk about we shouldn't be going there and we shouldn't be responding. And so we had to really somehow do something to reassure American people. The President of the United States, then Barack Obama, came to CDC. First time a sitting president had come to CDC and wanted to hear from us. And I was one of the 3 people and the only person who had actually just returned from leading our teams in West Africa to present to the president. And that very afternoon, he did what we asked him to do, and that was to bring the Department of Defense, our allies in defense, to set up the logistics and satellite information and the technology that would allow us to give confidence to our NGO communities that normally respond to these kind of epidemics, but were frightened that they would get sick in the field, couldn't get home, that they would run out of supplies, that they would be stranded in West Africa as this problem was just exponentially growing at a pace where we couldn't get people isolated and keep them from infecting others. And it was a game changer for us. And so that was probably the most memorable experience in my professional career as an officer.
Wow, these are incredible stories. I'm not going to answer the exact question because I don't know that I have anything quite so exciting to say, but I'm going to mention something that was pivotal, and it does tie back to something I learned at Weston. So I was out of graduate school. My first job as an investment banker. I was in a position called an associate. It's not a high-level position, but I was called to go to a very important meeting of 2 Fortune 500 companies were talking about merging. And the talks were pretty advanced, but kind of messy, as they tend to be. And I went with the founding partner of the investment bank, and I'm sure I was not his first choice to take because I was quite junior. And he said my instructions were not to speak unless spoken to, and then only speak facts, no opinions, no nothing, but preferably just don't speak. So, fine. So I'm sitting there, and discussions are going, and the gist of the discussion that day was the two firms putting in money and assets and what the debt that they already have and who's going to own what. And so it's complicated and messy and argumentative and confrontational, and it was really just a complicated algebra problem to me. And start scribbling it out, and I do it, and I do it again, I do it again. My boss, I'm like, I can answer this. And I, I said, showing him what I'm doing, and he recognized, I guess, that I apparently knew what I was doing somewhat. And he said, are you positive? And I said, I'm positive. So he says, all right, we can answer this. We've got it's called a capitalization table, cap table. We've got a draft cap table here. And he pointed at the board, he pointed at me, and I got up and did it. And it was algebra that I learned here at Westside. But again, I had confidence that I learned it well, and I had used it, of course, in college too. But it was a career-changing moment for me. Now, all these people knew who I was. Pushed me hugely forward in my firm. Obviously, I was with the founding partner, and there was lots of other firms there too. So again, not the most exciting thing ever, but very practical and something that I still remember very well.
And do you guys have a budget, like a personal budget? I've got $20 I can spend today on coffee or whatever. Nancy oversees $1 billion budget. $1 billion.
It's not the family.
Feeling that he did. I say that. Hold on 1 second before we let.
Ladies and gentlemen, take a seat for 1 second. Hold on for a second, please. Hold on for 1 second.
No, we have one.
Just hold on for one speaker, please. You'll be excused on agenda. Don't worry about it. They don't have
Yeah, you guys are more than welcome to stay if you have another monitor.
So one thing that really strikes me listening to the other awardees is, and when you look at us on paper, we all seem very, very different, but we have many things in common. Brian did work for Eli Lilly. My husband was with Eli Lilly his entire life. Michelle worked at the Pentagon. My husband's first job in the military was at the Pentagon. Jordan doesn't know this yet, but he knows one of our very best friends in life who was at the CDC with you, Jim Ledoux. And Nancy and I have both raised a lot of money in our lives. So just in this group of 5 people, and my point is that we all have much more in common than we think at first glance. And this is what we have found living around the world for 20 years. We lived in 14 cities in 6 countries on 3 continents. And it was the commonalities that really interested me. When we first got to Hong Kong, it was 1998, and Hong Kong, I don't know if you know this, was a British territory for 100 years. And we got there 1 month after it was turned back over, handed over to China, per the agreement. And when I was very interested in women's issues and the women of Hong Kong especially, and Rick traveled a lot, and I learned that just 4 years before that, women had just gained the right to inherit property. Now this is Hong Kong. This is one of the international finance centers of the world. And that stared me in the face, among many other things. So I was fortunate enough to run into 2 or 3 other women who thought as I did, and the highlight of my life was to co-found the Women's Foundation of Hong Kong, which is now a multi-million-dollar NGO serving women and girls in Hong Kong, and also boys, programs teaching boys and girls to lead together and to dispel gender stereotypes, teaching women to be business leaders and to be mentored by a variety of people. And they now raise millions of dollars and have a staff of 25, and it started in my living room.
All right, well, if you have to leave, please give them a round of applause. If you can stay and don't correct me if I'm getting this wrong. We'd love to have you
What? Can we sit in the back row? Get out of their way. Oh shit, I'm not trying to be on the camera. Yeah, I'm not eating. I'm getting.
Mind your shot?
No, you're not. You cool.
All right, good.
Other than I'm using the bathroom.
Fucking hate her. That's what we
You're gonna be laughing. I can't help it.
All right, thank you everyone who could stay with us. Again, this is such a great opportunity and we're excited to have you ask your questions. So if you would, just raise your hand, I'll point at you, you stand up. I'm not going to give you a microphone so we can save it up here. But if you have a question specifically for someone, just let them know and we'll go forward. So who wants to be our brave student and go first? I know you guys are not this shy. Anyone in particular, or I'll ask another one.
I asked one as a teacher.
Awesome.
Hi, my name is Diana Sherrigan. I'm curious if you guys could share a time in your life when you weren't successful and what you had to do to adapt or what changes you had to make and how that influenced you as you move forward.
Whoever wants to take it, I'll give you mine.
You know, I graduated from college terrified of public speaking. And I started control data, and one of my first tasks was to give a pitch on a product that I knew nothing about, and I was terrified. I was up all night. My poor wife had to put up with me, just panting. I did a miserable job on this speech anyway. Since it was my first speech, I thought, well, I better learn how to do some public speaking. And I ended my career probably giving 2 speeches a week. But I wanted to comment on the epidemic. Remember SARS in China?
Yes.
So I was leaving Beijing once, and I was just sick as a dog. And they were testing everybody that was getting on an airplane. And if you tested with a fever, you're going to stay there for 2 weeks at least. And I was sick. And they told me later, but everybody that was sick does is get a soft drink, go in the bathroom, and put the ice in your face. I didn't do that. But anyway, so I'm walking down the pathway to where they test, where they check you. And it shows up on the screen if you got heat. And at the time I went past it, the 2 guys are lighting each other cigarettes. So I walked without being noticed, but it would have been horrible to be quarantined there for 2 weeks for those surroundings. Anyway.
Just to touch on SARS, I'm fortunate that over my 25 years, working up, we're living overseas with my wife and boy-girl twins, and we had amazing experiences in Africa and Asia. And I was the CDC director in Thailand when SARS struck, so I ended up responding to that in Asia. It was a very, very, very fascinating epidemic. That one was about 880 cases with about 10% mortality. So it's pretty frightening because it made it to 3 continents, by international travel on airplanes, as you were saying. We've got better scanners now, so I don't even bother putting cold water on your face. I guess what was like a stumbling block or a frustration in my career. So I finished my medical school, internal medicine, thought I wanted to be an infectious disease specialist, imagining myself working in a major medical center and having grants from the National Institutes of Health and running a laboratory doing bench science. That's what I thought I would do, and I was a chemistry major at college. I spent time in the lab, so that was my path. And I was what's called a chief medical resident, where they asked you to stay on for a 4th year. And during that time, there was 3 of us, and there were 2 hospitals that we had to cover. So you had 4 months of doing whatever you wanted. The 3 of us all had a 4-month block where we got to do whatever we wanted. So I went with my infectious disease mentor to Sudan, where we were studying a disease called visceral leishmaniasis. And the project was twofold. We were trying to develop diagnostics for visceral leishmaniasis. It's one of these neglected tropical diseases, because the treatment for it is really expensive and very toxic. It's called pentastamp. So if you see someone with fever, in East Africa, if you don't know for certain that it's visceral leishmaniasis, you don't use this drug. And if it is visceral leishmaniasis and you don't know it, they're going to die if you don't give the drug. So it's real important to develop this diagnostic test. My major project required tissue culture. So we would go to these Eritrean refugee camps. Back then there was an Eritrean crisis. There's refugee crisis always anywhere in the world. Right now it's a lot to do with Syria. With, sadly they're everywhere. Back then it was Eritrea. And there were these refugee camp doctors that were saying, we need help, we need to know if this is visceral leishmaniasis. And I would go back to the lab in Khartoum with these specimens and try to do this experiment. I did it over and over and over again. It was before the internet, before sat phones, before mobile phones. There was no one to talk to, and I didn't know why my incubator kept overgrowing with fungus and my experiment failed. I would just do it over and over and over again. And then going back out to get more tissue specimens, I met these refugee doctors and learned about what they were doing in refugee medicine and public health. And it was a transformative experience for me, going, I don't want to be a laboratory NIH bench scientist. That is a great career, it's great for somebody else, but that's not me. I want to be a refugee doctor. I want to be on the front lines of where there's human challenges. And we still needed that diagnostic test, but it wasn't going to be me that was going to develop it. I was going to be the guy who was screaming for the next test. And it changed my life, and I found public health, and eventually found my way to Centers for Disease Control, where I've been a public health professional, and continue to use those skills working for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to this day.
Very good. My answer, I'll just give kind of a short answer. I have no trouble thinking of a time when I wasn't being successful. I was just thinking through the various possibilities to tell you about. At one point in my career, fairly early on, I was in chemical engineering out of college, as I mentioned, and I went to work as a field engineer in the oil and gas industry. And that wasn't just really my first choice, but that was what was available at that time. The oil prices were down and they didn't need a lot of people in the offices. So that turned out to be great. I ended up having a little staff of union employees. I was responsible for a plant, and then later a bigger plant, and then I had a bigger group of people that reported to me, and it went really well, and we went 5 years without an accident, and the things are going great, and I'm visualizing myself as kind of a leader, and things are going pretty well. Now it's time for me to move out of the field, and I realized that there's all the jobs that were there were going back to the office, and not that there's anything wrong with offices, but so as an example, I would be put in a pool of people that were given large stacks of blueprints and were to count the numbers of nuts and bolts to order, that sort of thing. So these are important things, but here I'd been, doing something that to me was more important and certainly more exciting, and I could see that my career at that time was not going to go the way I wanted it to go. It just wasn't, and it's you want it to, but it's not going to do it. So in my case, I went back to graduate school, and that's when I sort of made a turn from engineering to business and finance. And I wasn't sure going into graduate school what I would do. I thought I might get out and go to work, say for the chemical industry instead of the oil and gas industry, and go back into management that way. But I ended up getting very interested in finance. So it was just a point where you reach where you're like, I want to do this, but it does not exist for me at this time. So I have to do something. I have to make a change.
Anybody else have a question? Or,
Sorry.
Oh, well, I
you go
was
ahead.
just gonna sort of echo what you say. I mean, you did have an actual career. I had a lot of trouble establishing a career, and I really, at the beginning, tried to blame it on my husband because he had a great career, and he was climbing the corporate ladder. And we kept moving every 2 years or less, and then I had kids, and it was like, what about me? But finally, we got overseas, and it was impossible for me to work. His work visa required that the wife didn't take any jobs from local people. So I had to reinvent myself several times, and it really taught me that you need to be nimble, you need to be open, you need to think outside the box, and you need to create opportunities for yourself. Nobody's going to do it for you. You have got to make your life, and my decision was that I wanted to make a life that would make other people's lives better. So that's what I finally ended on. I eventually did, after my children went off to college, start my own business, but I was in my 50s by then.
any other questions? Yes, please.
What advice do you have for current Westside students?
Advice for current Westside students. Anything you want.
I would honestly say that the best advice that I could give you is don't limit your imagination. Don't limit yourself in what you think you're able to do. Keep your opportunities open because you never know when you're going to stumble into an opportunity that you never knew that might be the perfect answer. Along those lines, dabble in things that you don't think you're interested in. Take a class that might open your horizons to see potentials that you did not think were there. I am still, after 21 years in the military, stumbling across opportunities that I did not know existed and jumping into them with 2 feet whenever I get the opportunity to. So I guess putting it simply, don't limit yourself. The world, the opportunities, you have youth on your side, not that you can't start another career or even a second or third as you go through, but really take advantage of all that Westside gives you to really explore what is out there and use it to your advantage.
I echo those sentiments. I'll try to give a couple other thoughts. First of all, my 3 closest friends in the world are friends from high school, and we see each other at least once a year, sometimes more than that. And whenever I'm going through different difficult challenges in my life or different milestones and decisions, those are the 3 people that I call. So think about your friendships now. It's very likely that, especially if you end up leaving the state, you might think maybe it'll be hard to maintain those friendships. But where you are now in your life, those are the truest, best friends and bonds that you're probably ever going to have, and they can last forever. The second thing I would say is my exposure to so many different things at Westside is what allowed me to also have the ability and the courage to change, my pathway along my medical career. I did 3 residencies. Most people would say that's really stupid. You wasted a lot of time. But I hadn't found it yet until I finally found it. And because of, I think, my exposure and knowing that trying until the shoe fits is an okay thing to do. And I'd say the last thing about my time here, I learned about how you have to discipline yourself. As you mentioned, the modular scheduling really was true. There were a lot of people, back in my era, there were a lot of people that hung out in these areas. I won't even say because maybe they're still called the same, and I don't want to intone a bad thing. But they were really smart, but they could just get away on their smarts without applying themselves. And there were others of us who went to these things called IMCs, and we just did our homework together and we studied hard. And we weren't going for the grade, we were going to understand what it was they were trying to teach us. And so you can't rest on, you're going to get by and do well. You have to really like want to grasp it because it's exciting and it's all there. And if you do that, when you get to college and on wherever you end up going, you always have that kind of look at how you do your profession. It's a lot more fun, and you almost can do anything you want.
Whatever. There we go. Perfect.
So the advice I'd give to West Side students, and it's advice I'd give to anybody that sees themselves ending up in a workforce somewhere. I'm going to assume that every person here is going to be a what they call a meets or exceeds or superior employee, because you simply care enough to come to this kind of an event and learn. And if you are, and again, I'm sure you will be, you never have to do anything that you don't want to do, that doesn't feel right to you, that your boss assigns to you. And I'm not just talking about things that don't feel right from whether they're corrupt or not, but I mean, even so many times in my career, somebody called me in the office, Alan, your job is going to Oregon. So you're going to Oregon. And I'd say, no, I'm not. I'll just leave out the side door. I won't embarrass anybody. No, okay, never mind. Your job's here. And if you're in the exceeds or superior category, you don't have to be forced to do something. And your management needs to know that you have an agenda too. You have a business plan too. And hopefully you're going to be working for employers that try to align your business plan with what they'd like you to do. And then you're going to enjoy your jobs, you will grow faster. And so just keep that in mind when you get out there. Is that you're working for yourself, no matter who you're working for. And you don't never have to do anything you don't want to do or doesn't feel right.
I'll just say briefly, I would say keep your glass half full, be optimistic, be willing to take some risks, and manage your reputation. That's just about your most valuable asset, and take very good care of it, manage it very carefully. That's what my advice.
So I personally want to go into like forensic science, but like I just don't have like the motivation to. Like, what do you do when you can't obtain that self-motivation, and when you can't really find motivation to push yourself to do something you want to do? Because for me, I need something to push me on to it, or else it doesn't seem right. And I know that this is what I want to do, and like I want to pursue forensics, but like I can't find that motivation, or like I can't self-motivate myself.
I'll just briefly say, having worked with young women over the years, I would say that finding a mentor or mentors, or finding someone who's doing what you're doing, who's willing to spend a little bit of time with you to show you the possibilities and talk to you about it. I think people, once they are in a field that they love, can just exude an enthusiasm that is sometimes very, just catches you and draws you in. So that's one of my pieces of advice.
Excellent advice. What I have to say is kind of similar. I'm not sure where you are in school, but try and get some real-world experience in it, so that you can tie back what you're learning to what it really is going to mean. And I think that'll make it more interesting for you and more meaningful to say, well, this is why I'm doing this.
I would just add on to that. It's not like eating the entire elephant. Take baby steps. There's an aspect of mentorship that I think is definitely there, and of course, getting that experience. Volunteer. Put yourself in a situation where you have that exposure so that you can see all aspects of the forensics mission and what you're involved in. And then set smaller goals that are easily achievable. And I think once you see that you are meeting those goals, it will help build that enthusiasm and that ability and that drive from within to push yourself to do more.
Just add to what I said. because you made me think of that. And don't worry about getting a paid job in it. Just, if you go to somebody and say, I'm interested in this, but I want to see more about what it's really about, they probably will be pretty excited to show you about it. So it's not really one of those times to try and get that paid job. It's very hard to get meaningful jobs at this stage in science or most things, honestly. So yeah, that was like, that's how I learned I didn't want to be a veterinarian. I was an intern, which was an unpaid position. And I learned I didn't want to do it at all. And hopefully what you'll learn is the different subsets of what you can do and which parts of it interest you and lots of things.